The bell rang at Jefferson High, its harsh clatter echoing through the long, fluorescent-lit hallways like a warning. Kids poured out of classrooms, laughing, yelling, bumping shoulders. No one noticed Elijah. They never did. He kept his hood up, earbuds in, backpack slung over one shoulder, his daily armor. At 16, Elijah Washington had mastered the art of being invisible. His teachers called him respectful. His classmates called him quiet. But no one really knew him, not even close. The morning sun filtered through the cracked windows, casting golden stripes across the scuffed linoleum floors. Elijah's sneakers made no sound as he moved toward his locker, fourth one down from the left, near the janitor's closet, where the paint peeled and the ceiling still dripped from last month's storm. He twisted the combination, 14, 36, and 8. Click. As he opened it, he noticed the folded sheet of paper taped inside. A single word, thick black marker. Thug. He froze. A rush of heat climbed his neck, pulsing in his ears. Slowly, he peeled the paper off and crumpled it. No one around him looked up. Just like yesterday, when someone had scrawled, "Go back to Africa," across his biology textbook. And the day before, when he found his gym locker emptied, contents soaked in the sink. He never said anything. Because when you're black and quiet in a mostly white school in rural Georgia, you learn to swallow things. Speak up and you're aggressive. Defend yourself and suddenly you're a threat. He closed his locker gently, took a deep breath, kept walking. In AP history, Mr. Connolly was already mid-rant about the Constitution. "It's the cornerstone of American justice," he bellowed, pounding the desk for emphasis. Elijah slid into the back row, unnoticed. Justice. The word made Elijah's stomach tighten. He glanced at his desk. Someone had carved the N-word into the wood, still there from last semester, still untouched. Connolly continued, "Everyone in this country gets due process, fair treatment under the law. That's what makes us different from the rest of the world." Elijah wanted to laugh, wanted to scream. Instead, he doodled quietly in the margins of his notebook, a pair of eyes watching from behind jail bars. Next to him, Jake Simmons leaned over and whispered just loud enough for others to hear, "Hey, Eli, heard your cousin got locked up again. Guess it runs in the family, huh?" The class snickered. Elijah didn't look up. He clenched his jaw, fighting every urge. Jake was the golden boy. Quarterback, straight A's, teacher's pet. He could say anything. Elijah couldn't even breathe wrong without drawing attention. Lunch came. Elijah sat alone, as usual, under the staircase near the vending machines. He was halfway through a turkey sandwich when the vice principal's voice crackled over the intercom. "Elijah Washington, please report to the main office immediately." Whispers broke out in the cafeteria. Heads turned. Phones slid out of pockets. Elijah froze mid-bite. What now? The office smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. Ms. Travis, the school secretary, wouldn't meet his eyes as she gestured toward the principal's door. "Go on in, Elijah." He stepped inside. Principal Harden sat stiffly behind his desk. A police officer, uniformed armed, stood beside him. "Elijah," Harden began, voice clipped, "we've had a serious incident. A student's locker was vandalized. Racial slurs. Threats." Elijah's heart dropped. "What does that have to do with me?" The officer stepped forward. "Your fingerprints were found on the locker. We have surveillance footage showing you near the scene." Elijah blinked. "I use the same hallway every day. My locker's right there." Harden didn't flinch. "You were seen loitering. You had motive. You've been in fights before." "No, I haven't," Elijah shot back. Harden raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Simmons reported an altercation last week. I didn't even touch him." But it didn't matter. They'd already made up their minds. The officer pulled out handcuffs. "Elijah Washington, you're under arrest for vandalism, harassment, and hate speech." Time slowed. No, he stammered, backing away. But the cuffs clicked around his wrists. A teacher passing by gasped. A few students in the hallway began filming. And just like that, Elijah, the quiet kid, the artist, the honor student, became another headline waiting to happen. Down at the station, the questions didn't stop. The accusations twisted tighter. No one listened. His mom arrived in tears. His public defender barely looked prepared. A court date was set. Juvenile detention loomed. But none of them saw the truth. None of them knew what Elijah was really capable of, and what he was about to uncover would change everything. The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold sweat. Elijah sat next to his public defender at the defendant's table, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the judge's bench. He'd never seen a courtroom in real life before. Now he was the one on trial. Judge Franklin was a white man in his 60s, gray beard trimmed to perfection, gavel resting lightly in one hand. The American flag stood tall behind him. Ironic, given that the only thing Elijah felt from his country right now was betrayal. To his left sat Jake Simmons, clean-cut in a blazer, too nice for a public schooler. His parents, influential in the community, donors to the school board, sat right behind him, stoic. Next to them, Principal Hardin whispered to the prosecutor. No one looked at Elijah. The bailiff called the case. State of Georgia versus Elijah Isaiah Washington. His mother clutched her purse in the back row, lips moving in silent prayer. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, standing confidently, this is a case of targeted racial hate. The victim, Jacob Simmons, found slurs and threats carved into his locker. The suspect was seen in the area. His fingerprints were found at the scene. We intend to prove that Elijah Washington is not only guilty, but dangerous. Elijah's attorney rose. Ms. Powell, new, young, her voice slightly trembling. Your Honor, my client has no record, no history of violence. The locker in question is 2 lockers away from his. There is no footage showing the act itself. My client denies all allegations. Judge Franklin didn't blink. Understood. We'll proceed. The courtroom shifted. Everyone settled into their expectations. Except Elijah. He wasn't angry. He was burning. Burning with the knowledge that they weren't after truth. They were after control. During recess, Elijah stepped into the hallway to catch a breath. The cold air felt like needles on his skin. Ms. Powell joined him. This is going to be tough, she said, eyes scanning the corridor. They're pushing for maximum sentencing. For what? Elijah snapped. I didn't do anything. I believe you, she said softly, but the system's not built on belief. It's built on narrative. He looked away. That night at home, Elijah sat on the floor of his room, laptop open, dozens of tabs filling the screen. Wrongfully accused black teenagers. Racist court rulings. School-to-prison pipeline. Judicial bias in Georgia. It all looked the same. The faces, the stories, the outcomes. He closed the laptop slowly, stared at the ceiling. He wasn't going to be next. The next morning back at school, things were worse. Jake's story had spread like wildfire. Students whispered behind cupped hands. Teachers paused mid-sentence when Elijah entered. His locker had been emptied. Someone had drawn a stick figure hanging from a noose on the door. He turned and walked away. Sitting alone at lunch, he scrolled through his phone until a voice cut through the noise. You know they're setting you up, right? Elijah looked up. A girl stood across from him. Tall, braided hair, brown eyes that didn't flinch. I'm Amira, she said. My cousin got expelled last year for threatening behavior. Know what he did? Raised his voice when someone called him the N-word. Elijah nodded slowly. Yeah, sounds familiar. Amira sat. You need help. I have a lawyer, he said. No, you need proof. She pulled a USB stick from her jacket pocket. My brother's on the yearbook committee. He gets access to hallway cameras. Not the same ones the admin sees. Elijah stared. This was the day they're talking about, she continued, and you're not even near Jake's locker. His heart skipped. You're serious? She nodded. I don't like injustice. I like receipts. They huddled over a laptop that night at Amira's place. The footage was grainy but clear. Jake was at his locker at 9:01 a.m. Elijah didn't enter the hallway until 9:07, a 6-minute gap. Ms. Powell's eyes widened the next morning as they presented the clip. This changes everything, she whispered. Only if we make it loud enough, Elijah said. At the pre-trial hearing, the footage was submitted into evidence. The judge watched silently. Jake's face tightened. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Outside the courthouse, a small group of students stood with signs. Shock would shout justice for Elijah. Amira had posted the video online the night before. By noon, it had over 30,000 views. A local news crew rolled up just as Elijah stepped onto the courthouse steps. A reporter leaned in. "Do you have anything to say to the people watching?" Elijah looked straight into the lens. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to go to school, to live my life. But I'm done being silent. I'm done being invisible." And with that, he turned and walked away. But he wasn't just a quiet kid anymore. He was the spark, and the fire was only beginning. By Friday, the school was buzzing louder than the fire alarm system. The video Amira had leaked was spreading like wildfire across TikTok, Reddit, even local Atlanta subforums. Every hour brought more views, more shares, more comments. Students were reposting it with captions like, "This school's messed up," and "Elijah deserves better." But not everyone was cheering. In the principal's office, the atmosphere was ice cold. "Ms. Powell, I would have appreciated a heads up before this media circus," Principal Harden said, adjusting his tie as though the noose were around his neck. "This is hurting the school's reputation." Ms. Powell didn't flinch. "It's your administration that allowed a false accusation to escalate into a criminal case." Elijah sat quietly beside her, face unreadable. Principal Harden cleared his throat. "Regardless of your personal feelings, Ms. Powell, we can't have students disrupting the order of this institution." "Disrupting?" Elijah said, his voice steady. "You mean telling the truth?" Harden's jaw tensed. "I think we're done here." But Elijah wasn't. Not anymore. That afternoon, Amira met him by the flagpole. "You ready?" she asked, pulling out her phone. He nodded. They walked together toward the school courtyard, where more than 60 students were already gathered, holding signs, chanting softly. Most had never spoken to Elijah before. Now they were here because something inside them clicked, because they knew how easily they could be him. Amira handed Elijah a megaphone. "Speak." He hesitated, then stepped forward. "My name is Elijah Washington. I didn't carve anything into anyone's locker. I didn't commit a hate crime. But this school tried to make me the villain of a story they already wrote." Students quieted. Some lifted their phones to record. "I followed the rules. I kept my head down. And still, they came for me. Why? Because of my skin. Because I don't come from money. Because I don't fit their picture of innocence." He scanned the crowd, locked eyes with a few teachers watching from the windows. "This isn't just about me. This is about every black kid who's ever been told to sit down, shut up, and be grateful. About every kid who's punished more harshly, questioned more quickly, believed less often." A silence fell. Then came the first clap, then more, and then cheering. That night, Elijah trended on Twitter. Local reporters picked up the story, then state reps. Then a nationally syndicated podcast asked for an interview. Even a few school board members began issuing statements like, "Deep concern," and "We're investigating." But with attention came heat. The next morning, Elijah found red spray paint on the family's garage door. "Liar!" His mom rushed out of the house. "Go inside." But he didn't move. He stared at the word, bright as fresh blood, until the police arrived. "They said it was probably some angry kids," his mom said later, arms folded tight as a shield. "But I know what it is, and you do too." Elijah sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. "I started something," he whispered. "You did," she said. "Now finish it." Monday brought a new twist. Ms. Powell stormed into the school conference room, gripping a thick manila folder. "Security audit request," she said, slamming it onto the table. Turns out the school's own logs show the locker surveillance system had malfunctioned 2 weeks before the incident. "What are you suggesting?" the prosecutor asked coolly. "That this whole case was built on selective enforcement," Powell shot back. "One kid's locker gets vandalized and they pull a full investigation. 2 weeks earlier, Elijah's locker had monkey scrawled across it in Sharpie. No one lifted a finger. Even the judge seemed rattled when presented with the documentation later that week. "Is this true?" Judge Franklin asked the school's attorney. The man hesitated. "We don't have those logs anymore." Gas rippled across the gallery. Amira caught it on video. That night, the school's Yelp and Google reviews were flooded with comments from parents and alumni. Terms like racial bias, targeting black students, and cover-up culture filled the pages. Elijah's case had become bigger than anyone expected. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting the system. And for the first time in his life, it was the system that started to flinch. By the time Friday rolled around, the case had shifted from a school matter to a citywide scandal. Channel 2 Action News ran a segment titled, "Wrongly Accused, Atlanta Teens Case. Sparks Outrage Over Racial Bias in Schools." And just like that, Elijah became the face of a movement he never asked for. Outside the courthouse, demonstrators gathered with signs. "Protect Black Youth. We stand with Elijah. Justice in our classrooms." But inside, it was anything but hopeful. Powell leaned over to Elijah in the courtroom hallway. "Remember, they don't care that you're scared. They care if you stay silent." He gave a small nod. The judge called the hearing to order. On the prosecution's bench sat Mr. Carrington, the same smug assistant DA who had refused to speak to Ms. Powell 2 weeks ago. He stood and began painting a picture of a school system under threat, of escalating tensions, of the need to take decisive action when hate incidents occur. He used words like symbolic violence and moral responsibility, but he never once said Elijah's name. Then Ms. Powell stood, calm, precise, terrifying. "We don't dispute the right of schools to investigate," she said, voice steady, "but we do dispute how they choose who to punish, because Elijah Washington was never the problem. He was the target." She produced the photos, the earlier slur on Elijah's locker. She produced the logs, showing administrators were aware and did nothing. She even called Amira as a witness, who testified that another student overheard Thomas Granger, the white student whose locker had been scratched, laughing about getting that black kid in trouble. The courtroom fell silent. Even Mr. Carrington couldn't spin that. But the judge didn't dismiss the case. Not yet. Instead, she ordered a full evidentiary hearing. "Given the racial disparities presented," she said, "we need transparency on how disciplinary decisions are made at Lincoln Grove High." That one sentence hit like a sledgehammer. Afterward, Ms. Powell turned to Elijah with steel in her eyes. "This is your crack of daylight, but it's just the start." By Monday, things at school had turned tense. Some students applauded Elijah in the halls. Others, not so much. "You think you're a hero now?" a voice hissed behind him at lunch. He turned to see Thomas standing by the soda machine. Elijah didn't answer. Thomas stepped closer. "You embarrassed me, and my family." "That's funny," Elijah said calmly, "because I don't remember lying to get you arrested. You scratched my locker." "I didn't. And deep down, you know it." Thomas's lip curled. "People like you always play the victim." That did it. Elijah stood up slowly, eyes locked with his. "I'm not a victim," he said. "I'm a survivor. Big difference." Students nearby froze. A teacher started to rise. Thomas backed off, but not far. Later that week, a quiet hero emerged. A girl named Madison Harper, blonde, white volleyball star, walked up to Miss Powell in the hallway. "I have something," she whispered, "but if I give it to you, I need to stay anonymous." Miss Powell raised an eyebrow. "Depends what it is." Madison pulled out a flash drive. "There's a video from the security feed, the one they said wasn't working." It showed Thomas and his friends laughing. It showed them scratching the locker. It showed Elijah nowhere near it. They had lied, and the school had buried it. Ms. Powell's hands trembled as she took the drive. "You just changed everything," she whispered. That Friday, the courthouse was packed. The footage was shown. Gasps, cries, the judge's gavel pounding for order. And then, silence. Elijah stared at the screen, jaw clenched. His name had been dragged through the mud for weeks. But now the truth played in front of everyone. Unedited, unmistakable. Ms. Powell stood. "We request immediate dismissal of all charges." The prosecutor didn't even argue. The judge nodded. "Motion granted. Case dismissed." Just like that. It was over, almost. because the story had already grown too big to contain. A new question echoed through the media and halls of power. If this could happen to Elijah, how many more were there? The moment the judge dismissed the charges, Elijah felt a strange, empty quiet inside. There were no cheers, no fists in the air, just silence, like the whole city was holding its breath. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed him. Elijah, how does it feel to be vindicated? What would you say to the school board? Do you believe racism played a role in your arrest? Flashes, microphones, chaos. But Elijah said only one thing. Ask them why the cameras were hidden until it was too late. Then he turned and walked away. Behind him, Ms. Powell stepped in front of the cameras. We don't want just justice for this boy. We want a system that stops blaming black children every time something goes wrong. The clip went viral within hours. That night, Elijah lay awake, watching the street lamp shadows crawl across his ceiling. He should have felt free, but all he felt was the weight of being that kid from the news. People looked at him differently now. Not like he was a threat, but like he was a symbol, a martyr, a headline, a cause. And that terrified him. His mom knocked gently on his door. You okay? He nodded. Yeah, just thinking. She sat beside him. You don't have to carry all this alone, baby. He looked at her. Feels like I already am. She pulled him close. Then let me carry some of it with you. Back at school, things weren't better. They were just different. Thomas was suspended for a week. The principal issued a bland statement about a failure in administrative oversight, and the vice principal, the one who had pushed for Elijah's expulsion, quietly resigned. But no one apologized to Elijah. No assemblies, no public acknowledgments, just whispers in the hallway and eyes that couldn't meet his. That's when Ms. Powell came to him with an idea. Elijah, there's a civil rights inquiry being launched into Lincoln Grove. They want you to speak. He hesitated. You don't have to, she said quickly. It's your choice. He thought about the cameras, the headlines, the pressure. Then he thought about the next kid, the one who wouldn't have a lawyer like Ms. Powell, the one who would get railroaded in silence. I'll do it, he said, but on my terms. 2 weeks later, Elijah stood before a packed room at the City Council's Human Rights Committee hearing. City leaders, parents, reporters, even the superintendent was there. He cleared his throat. I used to think that if I just kept my head down, things would be fine. That being quiet meant I'd stay safe. He paused, scanning the room. But being quiet didn't protect me. It just made me invisible. You could hear a pin drop. They accused me because of the color of my skin. They tried to make me confess to something I didn't do. And if it weren't for one girl with a flash drive, I'd still be branded a criminal. Murmurs rippled through the room. I'm not here to beg for sympathy. I'm here to say this can't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone. When he sat down, a slow clap broke out. Then another. And soon the room was on its feet. It didn't feel like victory, but it felt like something real. Later that month, the Department of Education launched an investigation into Lincoln Grove and several other schools in the district. A task force was formed, bias training was mandated, and a quiet bill, drafted by Councilwoman Ramirez and backed by parents across the city, passed into law, the Elijah Act. It required schools to release disciplinary footage to parents within 48 hours. It also made racial equity reviews mandatory before suspensions or expulsions. Elijah's name was etched into policy, but he still walked the halls of school with his head down, because for all the change in the system, the stares hadn't stopped. Some students whispered snitch when he passed. Others called him a hero. He hated both. He just wanted to be a kid again. But that version of him, the quiet kid, was gone. They'd pushed him too far. Now he had no choice but to become something else.
Spring came late that year, and with it came a storm Elijah didn't see coming. Just when things seemed to settle, with policy changes and public praise, a new whisper started spreading. He only got off because of the news. His mum probably paid someone. Betty really did it. The lies stung more now, not because they were new, but because they came from teachers too. Mr. Dunleavy, his English teacher, refused to call on him in class. Coach Jefferson pulled him off the track team without explanation. And at the front office, the receptionist never smiled at him anymore. It was as if clearing his name made him even more suspicious. Like surviving the fire meant he started it. One afternoon, Elijah sat in the back of a school board meeting with Ms. Powell. The board was discussing whether to officially revise Lincoln Grove's zero-tolerance policy, but when the vote came up, it was a tie. Deadlock, and one board member, Mr. Hayden, stood and said, "I'm not convinced these so-called race-based disparities aren't just coincidences. Kids make mistakes, black or white." Ms. Powell leaned toward Elijah. "You hear that? They still don't believe the data." He clenched his jaw. "Then I'll give them a reason to listen." By Friday, Elijah had compiled a 14-page report. Not just on his own case, but 3 other black students disciplined without evidence in the last year. He spoke with each of them, got their written statements, their parents' stories, even screenshots of deleted emails from a friendly janitor who'd seen too much. And then, during the next hearing, Elijah asked to speak. He stood before the board, the mayor, and a room packed with news cameras. He didn't yell, he didn't cry, he just told the truth. "They told me school was where I'd grow, but all I learned was how to defend myself. Not from bullies, from adults." He laid the report on the podium. "This isn't about me anymore. It's about how many kids you fail to see." There was a pause. Then, for the first time, Mr. Hayden didn't speak. He lowered his eyes. 2 weeks later, the policy passed. Unanimously. Elijah became the youngest person ever asked to join the city's Youth Equity Council, but all he wanted was to sleep again. Nightmares still haunted him. Flashbacks to the arrest, the cold metal of the cuffs, the fluorescent lights of the holding cell, and the question that echoed louder than any scream. What if they never found the video? That question followed him everywhere. To the grocery store, to church, even to the mirror. Because Elijah wasn't just a kid anymore. He was evidence, and evidence carries weight. One day, a new student transferred to Lincoln Grove. His name was Amir. He was quiet, smart, a little awkward. During lunch, Elijah saw 3 boys corner Amir near the vending machines. He didn't wait. He walked straight over. "You'll need to bounce, now," the boys laughed. "What are you going to do? Write another report?" Elijah didn't flinch. "No, but I got the entire admin on speed dial now." They backed off. Amir looked stunned. "Thanks," he said. "I didn't think anyone would." Elijah nodded. "I didn't either, not at first." He handed Amir a folded paper. It had a list of names, teachers you could trust, counselors who actually helped, and his number. "They tried to break me," Elijah said, "but they just woke me up." Amir smiled, and Elijah, for the first time in months, smiled back. The courthouse lobby was cold, not just in temperature, but in spirit. Grey floors, pale walls, and the smell of recycled air. Jamal sat on the bench, hands clasped tightly between his knees, his mother beside him gripping a worn-out Bible. They'd been there since morning, watching a parade of people move in and out. Defendants, prosecutors, lawyers who didn't even make eye contact. A single ceiling fan rotated lazily above, its motion hypnotic. The state had filed formal charges: aggravated assault on an officer, resisting arrest, and, unbelievably, intent to incite violence. All based on the bodycam footage the police claimed was damaged during the altercation. No working video, no witnesses came forward, just the word of 2 white officers against Jamal, and a record, if you count being suspended for raising your voice at a teacher in the 9th grade. When their lawyer finally arrived, he didn't even sit. "They offered a deal," he said flatly. 6 months in juvenile detention, sealed record, therapy requirement. No trial. Jamal looked up slowly. "But I didn't do anything." The lawyer didn't flinch. "They're saying the trial will make things worse. The jury won't sympathize. They've already seen the report. Aggressive demeanor, gang-affiliated appearance." "Gang-affiliated? Because I wear hoodies?" Jamal's voice broke, eyes wide in disbelief. His mother stood. "We don't take no deal. My son is not guilty. You're his lawyer. Fight." But the lawyer only sighed. "Ma'am, I'm court-appointed. I don't have the bandwidth to turn this into a civil rights case." He left without waiting for their reply. That night, Jamal lay awake in bed, the city noise muffled by the thin walls of their apartment. His mind echoed with the word appearance. How can skin, hair, posture, how can that determine guilt? At school the next day, people avoided him. Some whispered, others stared. He passed a classroom where a teacher paused mid-sentence as he walked by. Even Mr. Beckwith, the janitor who used to chat with him every morning, just gave him a nervous nod now. By lunchtime, the pressure boiled over. In the cafeteria line, a white student named Ryan muttered under his breath, "Don't get violent now, Jamal. We're all just trying to eat." Everyone laughed. Jamal clenched his jaw. He didn't retaliate. He walked away, tray untouched. Later that evening, as the sunset bled across the horizon, he found himself wandering through the neighborhood, past shuttered stores, graffiti-tagged walls, and kids riding bikes in oversized t-shirts. The air smelled like heat and oil. He found himself at the basketball courts where it all started. The lights flickered. No one was around. He sat on the bench, alone, angry. Behind him, someone stepped into the glow of the overhead lamp. A girl, quiet, familiar. Ava. "I heard what's happening," she said, her voice careful. "I didn't ask you to come," Jamal muttered. "You didn't have to. They're trying to bury you, Jamal. But you're not invisible. Not to all of us." He looked at her. Her eyes didn't flinch. She handed him a folder. "What's this?" "My uncle's a photographer. He was there that night. Took some shots from across the street, didn't think much of it until I told him what happened." Jamal opened the folder slowly. Photos. One showed the officers cornering him, not the other way around. Another had one of them raising a baton before Jamal even moved. Proof. "But it's not video," he said, hesitant. "It's something," Ava replied. "And it's time to stop being quiet." The weight of those words pressed against his chest. That weekend, Jamal and his mum sat across from a new lawyer. Not court-appointed. A woman named Ms. Parker. Black. Fierce. Her suit was sharper than any blade, and her eyes even sharper. "I don't lose," she said, "and we're going to court." Jamal felt the tide shift just a little. The next hearing was scheduled. As he left her office, he passed a wall lined with framed articles. One caught his eye. "Young man falsely accused wins $2 settlement." Another. "Justice served after 3 years of silence." He paused, because his story was now one of them. And as he stepped outside, the sunlight felt different, brighter. But as he walked back to the car, a black SUV slowly pulled up alongside him. The passenger window rolled down. Officer Reynolds, the same cop from the arrest. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You think your little pictures are going to help you?" he said, voice cold. "You're messing with people who don't lose." The SUV pulled away, and in that moment Jamal understood. The fight wasn't just in court. It was everywhere, and it was just beginning. The courtroom doors felt heavier this time. Jamal stood in his new suit, borrowed from a cousin who'd only worn it once for a funeral, next to Ms. Parker. Her posture was firm, heels planted like a general surveying a battlefield. His mother sat a few rows back, clutching a cross in her right hand, a stack of legal pads in her lap. Inside, the air was still, not silent, just waiting. On the judge's bench, the Honourable Richard M. Ellsworth leafed through a case file with a face so blank it seemed carved from stone. Jurors sat in a half-moon arrangement, most of them white, most of them older, none of them meeting Jamal's eyes. The prosecution opened their case first. Officer Reynolds took the stand in uniform, crisp and polished, medals shining under the fluorescent lights. He was agitated, the officer said, voice smooth. Hostile, belligerent. He reached into his waistband. "I had no choice." He paused. "We feared for our lives." Ms. Parker didn't blink. When it was her turn, she approached slowly, heels clicking like metronome beats. "No bodycam footage," she said, glancing at the jury. "No dashcam. And conveniently, both officers forgot to enable recording. Isn't that correct, Officer Reynolds?" He shifted in his seat. "There was a malfunction," she nodded. "Yet, you documented everything else in your report, except for the fact that the young man you arrested had no weapon, made no threats, and, according to every eyewitness we reached, never raised a hand." Objection. Sustained. But the seed was planted. Next, Ms. Parker presented the photographs. Projected on a large screen in full colour, the images told a different story. One image, Jamal standing with hands slightly raised, posture passive. Next, Officer Reynolds swinging his baton before any contact had occurred. And the final, Jamal on the ground, face pressed into the pavement, his legs already zip-tied while Reynolds stood over him, triumphant. A hush fell across the courtroom. Ms. Parker turned to the jury. The state will tell you Jamal is dangerous, that he fit a description, that his quiet was threatening, that his skin was a warning, but pictures don't lie, and this is what injustice looks like. Outside, the media had caught wind. By the time court recessed, a small crowd had gathered. Activists, journalists, even a few familiar faces from Jamal's school. A cardboard sign waved in the breeze. Justice for Jamal. That night he couldn't sleep. His mind swam with images. The courtroom, Reynolds's eyes, the stunned face of a juror as the photos were shown. But mostly he thought about the SUV, that smile. The next morning, as he made his way to school, a patrol car parked across the street turned on its headlights the moment he stepped out. It didn't move, just watched. Jamal ducked into the building. Classes were different now. Some students looked at him like a hero. Others avoided him like he carried a disease. Teachers treated him delicately, afraid to say the wrong thing. Even Mr. Beckwith, the janitor, returned to his morning, "Hey, kid," but it rang hollow. At lunch, Ava sat across from him again. "You okay?" he shrugged. "They're watching," she whispered. "You know that, right? They're hoping you'll slip up, make their job easy." "I'm not giving them anything," he muttered. "Not one step." But later that afternoon, trouble found him anyway. After final period, his locker had been opened, jammed pride. His textbooks were scattered. A red marker had been used to scrawl across the inside. Liar. His stomach dropped. He looked around. No one was nearby. Cameras in that part of the hallway had stopped working that morning, according to the school office. The incident was written off as vandalism. No suspects. No consequences. That night, Ms. Parker called. "I need you to be careful," she said. "We're getting some pushback. The city doesn't want this trial turning into a spectacle. They may try to discredit you, dig into your family, your school history, even that suspension from 9th grade. Jamal closed his eyes. "What do I do?" She was quiet for a beat. "Stay clean. Stay calm. And remember, you're not the one on trial. The system is." 3 days later, the trial resumed. This time, Ms. Parker called a surprise witness. Julius Webb, a former officer turned whistleblower, sat stiffly in the witness box. A veteran of 20 years, discharged early after testifying against fellow cops in a brutality case. "I know Reynolds," Webb said plainly. "He was warned twice before for use of force, both times swept under the rug." The jury leaned in. "They target young black men," Webb continued, "because they know no one will believe them, because they know how to write a report to make it stick," Reynolds' lawyer objected. Overruled. Jamal's heart raced. Afterward in the hallway, Ms. Parker looked at him. "They're rattled. The DA is nervous. We're forcing cracks into the story." "But is it enough?" he asked. She hesitated. "It's a start." That night, Jamal received a text. Unknown number. Just one sentence. "You're making a mistake," followed by a photo. It was a picture of his mother, taken that day, at her job, standing alone in the parking lot. Jamal stared at the screen, blood pounding in his ears. Someone was watching her, watching them all. Jamal didn't sleep that night. He sat on the floor of his bedroom, phone gripped in his hand, staring at the photo. His mother, just off work, tired, unsuspecting, standing near her car. The timestamp on the image? 2 hours ago. No caption, no threat, just the message. "You're making a mistake." He knew exactly what it meant. Downstairs, his mother was humming in the kitchen, prepping lunch for tomorrow like nothing had changed. But something had. They were being watched. Someone, maybe more than one, was trying to remind him that silence would have been easier. The next morning, Jamal forwarded the text to Ms. Parker. She called instantly. "Do not respond," she said, sharp and low. "We'll escalate this immediately. I'm alerting the judge. You'll have an escort after school, understood? But they know where she works. I know. We'll handle it." But handle it didn't bring sleep or peace. At school, whispers followed Jamal wherever he went. Some kids looked at him like a celebrity, others like a grenade waiting to blow. Even the teachers walked on eggshells. Ms. Hollis, who once docked him for chewing gum in class, now offered a soft smile and extra credit. But no one talked about the photo scrawled on his locker last week, or the fact that he still hadn't been given a new lock. During third period, a note was slipped onto his desk. No name, just, You're not the first. You won't be the last. His chest tightened. That afternoon in court, the atmosphere was different, tense, like the air itself knew the trial had become more than facts and witness statements. Miss Parker opened with a bold move, submitting the threatening text into the record. Judge Ellsworth raised an eyebrow. You're alleging intimidation. We're not alleging, Your Honour. We're confirming. The prosecution objected. The judge allowed it, narrowly. Ms. Parker turned toward the jury. This is what happens when power feels threatened. It doesn't argue, it intimidates. It doesn't defend, it silences. Jamal watched their faces. One juror, a middle-aged black man in glasses, met his eyes for the first time since the trial began. The tide was shifting. Later, during recess, Ms. Parker pulled Jamal aside near the water cooler. We might win, she said, voice barely above a whisper. But if we do, they'll come harder after. That text wasn't the end. Jamal's hands trembled. I didn't ask for this, he muttered. I know, but you were brave enough not to look away when it found you. That makes you dangerous to them. That evening, a patrol car parked outside their house. It was supposed to be protective. But when Jamal peeked through the curtains and saw the silhouette of the officer in the front seat, white, stocky, head down, he couldn't shake the image of Reynolds. When the officer finally exited the car to walk a perimeter check, Jamal's pulse surged. It wasn't Reynolds, but it didn't matter. The uniform blurred everything. The next day, a new witness appeared in court. To Jamal's shock, it was Coach Redman, the gym teacher. He stepped into the witness box slowly, hands trembling just slightly. I was there, he said. I saw the last 30 seconds of the arrest. I didn't speak before because I didn't want to get involved. But I saw what happened. Jamal didn't resist. He didn't even speak. Officer Reynolds shouted, "Stop resisting," before Jamal even moved. Gasps in the gallery. The prosecution's jaw clenched. You're aware withholding information is a crime, the DA asked bitterly. I am, Redman replied, and I'm ready to deal with the consequences. But I couldn't let a kid take the fall for something he didn't do. Not anymore. When court adjourned, Ms. Parker looked stunned. That might have just flipped the whole jury, she said. Jamal's mother hugged Coach Redman in the hallway, silent tears running down her face. Back at school, things moved fast. The story hit local news, then national. Teen brutalized during arrest. Trial uncovers deep police misconduct. Pictures of Jamal from his social media, smiling with his little cousins, helping at food drives, standing shyly in a black hoodie, now floated across screens everywhere. He was a symbol, but the threats didn't stop. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a dead bird, left in his backpack. No blood, just feathers. And a sticky note. Stay quiet. He dropped the bag, heart thudding in his chest. Enough, he whispered. He found Ms. Parker immediately. We fight back harder, she said without hesitation. We bring it to the judge, the media, the department. That night, Jamal posted something for the first time since the trial began. It was just a picture of the note, and 4 words. This is still happening. Within minutes, it went viral. Shares, retweets, comments from activists, journalists, even celebrities. They're not afraid of the truth. They're afraid of you telling it. We see you, Jamal. Keep going. But behind all the encouragement came something else. A comment, buried deep, from an anonymous account. This isn't over, and we know where she sleeps. His hands clenched into fists. Jamal looked toward his mother's closed bedroom door. A line had been crossed, and he was done playing defense. I didn't tell my mum about the message. I couldn't. She already looked over her shoulder every time she stepped outside, already jumped when the house creaked at night. I couldn't pile more weight on her shoulders, but inside something in me snapped. They wanted fear, silence. Not anymore. The courtroom was packed on the final day. Journalists lined the back wall. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the moment court let out, reporters would scramble for headlines. They all wanted to be the first to say what happened to the quiet kid. Ms. Parker wore all black, Jamal's mother too. I walked in last, head high, trying to remember the boy I used to be, the one who stayed after class to help clean whiteboards, who wrote poems on the back of his homework, who thought adults would always do the right thing. He didn't exist anymore. The judge entered. We are ready for closing arguments. The prosecution spoke first. A slick voice, rehearsed pauses, words like Reasonable doubt and lawful detainment tossed around like confetti. Then it was Ms. Parker's turn. She didn't pace, didn't shout. She just walked up to the jury and said, "You saw the photos, you heard the threats, you listened to a teacher who risked his job, you read a text threatening a boy's mother just because he dared to speak." She paused, eyes locking with each juror. "You may think this is just about Jamal, but it's about every kid who was told shut up, every voice buried by paperwork, every bruise covered by a badge. You are not just deciding a verdict, you're deciding what kind of justice exists in this country." She stepped back, and just like that, it was in the jury's hands. We waited. An hour, then 2, then 6. By the time the clock passed midnight, they sent word, no verdict. They'd reconvene in the morning. Outside the courthouse, the air was electric. Protesters gathered with signs. "Justice for Jamal. We are watching." Someone played soft jazz from a speaker. A pastor handed out candles. I stayed quiet, sat on the steps. Ms. Parker joined me. "You okay?" "No, but I'm ready." She nodded. "We win this. It's not the end, you know that." "I know." I looked up at the building. "Let's finish what they started." The next morning the verdict came in fast. The jury filed in. Some looked pale, others stiff. One woman clutched her pen so tight it bent. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "Yes, Your Honour, we have." The silence was brutal. "In the matter of the state versus Jamal Rivers, we find the defendant." The pause was long enough to hurt. "Not guilty." The room didn't explode. It exhaled. My mother sobbed into her palms. Ms. Parker closed her eyes. One juror, a white woman in a green scarf, whispered something that looked like, "Thank God." But inside me, there was no victory dance, just a heavy release, like a weight finally cut loose. I stood, looked toward the prosecution's table. Officer Reynolds wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. He'd been reassigned. By the end of the week, I was back at school. Things weren't normal, they wouldn't be. Some teachers still avoided eye contact. One kid called me the trial kid in the hallway. But Ava stood by my locker, arms crossed like nothing had changed. "You did it," she said. "No," I told her, "we did it." Later that night, Ms. Parker invited us to a small gathering, just family, no cameras. She gave me a framed copy of the front page. "Local teen cleared after trial shocks nation." Below it, a quote. "The truth doesn't scream, it survives." I still see the photo sometimes. The one with my mum in the parking lot. Still get nervous when a patrol car drives too slow near my house. Still wonder if one of those jurors went home and cried for a system they never questioned before. But I know this much. They pushed the quiet kid, and I pushed back.